Lots of plants, lots of friends, lots of little tubes to go in and out of. Fun days, enriched environments. They have bigger brains. They learn better, although I'm not exactly sure how many things you can teach a crayfish to do. I just read the science. I've never designed a test for a crayfish, but so I'm told. So isolation, we know, is one factor. I think the contribution from the mental health field in the last decade, maybe even just the last 5 years, really is in the area of what we've learned about stress. Stress starts off as a positive experience from an evolutionary standpoint. Stress, a little bit of it, peps you up a little. It makes you more alert. It focuses your attention. It allows you to concentrate. Stress is not bad. We have this kind of mixed up notion about stress and wanting a stress-free world. We don't want a stress-free world. What we want is a chronic stress-free world. Acute stress, a little bit of, oh, I got to give this talk tomorrow. I better get a good night's sleep. A little bit of, got to prepare in advance. A little bit of stress is good to help you get your work done. So this isn't like about all stress bad, but chronic stress results in a steady drip, 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 drip of glucocorticoids. That's the stress response. And it goes directly to the hippocampus and poisons it. Now, I always feel like when I'm being taped, I should stop and say something like, I know that's not hard science, factually true. This is metaphorically true. It's not a direct toxin, like it goes right there and then your hippocampus is dead. But the point is that with the steady drip, drip, drip of glucocorticoids released because of stress, starts off as a good thing, turns to a bad thing, it does in fact shrink the hippocampus and inhibit new cells from being born. Not to mention what stress does to your heart, what it does to your diabetes, what it does to your pain tolerance. And so stress management and learning to understand how to deal with stress has got to be a key component of any healthy aging campaign. Because this, again, is one of those things true across all species and true across the lifespan. The difference for us when we're older is that our reserve, the residual number of cells that we can afford to lose and the number that we have to build changes. But this is true when you're 5, 10, 15, 20. Difference is you have more to compensate than you have when you're older. So let's kick it back to humans and see if there's anything else that we know at the so-called macro level that would lend any support to what I'm saying. Well, as I said above, our knowledge about aging and our knowledge about the aging brain really is in transition. We know so much more than we've ever known, and yet we're always learning new things. We know about this variation within individuals and between individuals, meaning that just because you have old bones may not mean that your brain is aging at the same rate. Aging in the sense of going through those changes. So within individuals, aging in one organ system doesn't predict aging in another. That's one way to put it. And the other thing is that as we age, the less alike one another we are. If you take a couple of infants in the newborn nursery, side by side, from a biological standpoint, they're very, very similar. You take two 80-year-olds, put them side by side. From a biological standpoint, they are very, very different. One of the things about late life care for the providers in the room that really is so critical is this notion of being informed by what the age parameter could do and then really maintaining an individualized focus. Very different than taking care of kids. Okay, probably should have had this slide in there earlier so that you would know about some of those things I was naming. I apologize for that. But here's your basic neuron. The synapse is actually the space between neurons. That's the cell body. Here are the dendrites, and here's the axon. And from your high school biology, you remember the signal comes in here. It shoots down the axon, releases some little neurochemical packets at the end here. And those neurochemical packets go to the next neuron in the chain, and there it is up here, and causes it to fire. So there you've got some coming in, and you've got dendrites fanning out. That's your basic neuron. Those are the parts I was talking about. Now, for those of you who like numbers, because I like to try to reach everybody's brain as best I can. And I know there are probably some people that like numbers better than pictures, so here's some numbers for you. We used to think that we were born with about 1 trillion neurons. I don't know who changed it, but the current thinking in the literature is now that it looks like we're born with 100 billion. I used to think this was a really big number until I started reading about the national debt. And then I realized, what's 100 billion? It's like somebody's pocket change. But it's what we start with. That's how many we probably have somewhere around birth. And we make some more, sort of postnatally for a little while. And then what happens is that through experience, we start pruning like crazy. We lose more brain cells in the first year of life than we lose in the last year of life. It's a very active, dynamic, neuronally plastic situation where experience says, you don't need those, here's some new ones. So it's constantly in flux, but we lose a lot. We get into, before I say how many we lose, let me tell you how this system works as an information highway. Start with 100 billion. And for each one of those 100 billion neurons, there are about 10,000 synapses. Okay? It's kind of mind-boggling. I mean, I have to admit, I cannot get my head around this number any more than I can the national debt. But so I think of it as like a really, really big number. For those of you who like numbers, it's 10 to the 4 times 10 to the 11th. And those of you who really like numbers know that that comes out to be 10 to the 15th. And there's actually a name for that number, and it's quadrillion. It's like 100,000 million or something, but I like this one better. 1 quadrillion opportunities to connect in the human brain. 10,000 synapses per 100 billion neurons equals 1 quadrillion points of connection. And we lose maybe 10,000 a day. If anybody wants to do the math, that turns out to be about 4% over a lifetime. So what's the big deal about losing a few, particularly now that you know that you'll make a few? Now, I have one more way to picture this. I'll show you this in just a moment. That I want you to get, one more notion I want you to get. And that is that in response to these changes, in response to this constant pruning in the face of experience, in the face of constant cell death, constant cell renewal in the hippocampus, the brain does some things. Point A here shows 2 nerve cells. That's what's being displayed here for you. 2 nerve cells. These branches are all called dendrites. The spaces are the synapses. And when the brain loses one, look at the top line. When the brain loses a neuron, it responds by branching out more. So that when you start with 2, you lose 1, the remaining 1 just starts growing more branches. Any of you who have ever had apple trees, I ruined an entire orchard when I first moved to my farm by over pruning an apple tree. Know what I'm talking about. If you over prune, you just get branches everywhere.